I am going to start off with a heavily emphasized disclaimer. This is not at all by any means going to be related to the Vic Mignogna controversy that has been going on for a little over a week now. It has a little bit to do with that, but I myself will go on the record of saying that I am neutral on the whole stance. I don't want to get involved in the controversy specifically, but I felt the topic of sexual assault and sexual abuse victims having a voice while others using it for their own advantage to have a 15 minutes of fame needs to be spoken out, because I am concerned, heavily concerned and worried about those who have actually truly suffered sexual assault and sexual abuse not being taken seriously because of stuff like this. I want to start by saying the whole rumors, allegations, true or not, coming out about Vic is not uncommon. We have seen it many times among famous people of all spectrums, whether they're in the anime industry or whether they're in Hollywood. We see it all the time. It's not an uncommon thing, where at the peak of someone's popularity, someone will come out with some kind of allegation to try to defame them, whether it's true or not. Most of the time it's true, like, for example, the whole issue with Kevin Spacey, where he got arrested for that. There's stuff like that can be true. But stuff like, what's a good example? I hate bringing this guy's name up because I don't like him at all. Those of you guys who remember the lady who accused Justin Bieber of raping her and having a child with her, or however that story went, turned out to be false, and of course, Bieber made that stupid song about it, or there was a stupid song about it. It was such a long time ago, I barely remember it. I just know that there was a stupid song about the situation. But that's an example of an accusation along the similar line being false. And the reason why I'm so worried is because I feel like those who are actual victims and actual true sufferers of sexual abuse and sexual assault will, down the line, not be taken seriously by other people when they speak out. Because it's so common to the point it's a social norm to make allegations which 90% of the time after digging turn out to be untrue. And again, we see it everywhere with celebrities, even politicians, and as much as I hate bringing up politicians, I'll refrain from going to that territory because personally I think both parties are horrible and I don't like talking about politics in general, so I am going to stay as far away from that as possible. But yeah, again, some end up being true, some end up being false. And 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, they end up being false, but it benefits the accuser because they get their 15 minutes of fame. They just get popular by jumping the bandwagon and the hype train. And it worries me because I feel if this trend becomes so common, people are not going to believe those who actually suffered sexual abuse and assault. An example years ago, and I'm pretty sure it still continues to this day. I myself haven't seen it happen, but I'm sure if the internet exists, there's people out there that still do it. When the ranting community was small, it was a small pool in the early 2012, 2013. No, it wasn't that long. It was like 2014, 2015. I believe it was a long time ago. It escapes me. But the community was a small pool. It was just me, Hyperbeam Eevee, Conqueror 09, Amy Chan, Sonic 93, and Jinx Drowned. Now, I am fully aware that Jinx Drowned, she is now a he, and he goes by Numi Pixels. I just want to make that clear that when I mentioned him, I don't intend to misgender him, I don't intend to dead name him, but I also don't want to create confusion for those of you who don't know. So for the sake of not wanting to dead name him, but also not wanting to confuse you guys, I'm going to be saying Jinx/Numi for that sake. Anyway, one of the many people that were ranted on back in those days was a guy named Yoshi1, who was notorious for many things, one of them being using his I believe it was autism. It was one of those mental disorders. Using that as a way to get away with his bad behavior. And as time went on and people saw others doing the same thing, like Princess Elizabeth, and who was, she was a piece of work. She would be a bitch to people and blame her autism on it, blame her Asperger's or whatever she had. Again, I don't know because it was a long time ago. It escapes me. So forgive me if I say the wrong thing. But it's an example of people using their disorder as a means to get away with something. Get away with their bad behavior, make an excuse for their actions, when in reality it's not an excuse. But because of that, and because it became such a normal trend, people started taking those with mental disabilities less seriously, because those people would constantly use their autism, their Asperger's, their depression. They would use it as an excuse to get away with things. And unfortunately, that is where I see the similarity happening here when it comes to sexual assault victims. And that's why I am worried. Because sexual assault is a much more serious issue than having a disability. No, I'm not saying that having a mental disorder isn't serious. It is a serious thing. But a traumatic experience that warped you psychologically, such as sexual assault and sexual abuse, or even physical assault and physical abuse, that's something taken a bit more seriously these days. And I'm worried that it's also going to fall into the same spectrum as it has with those who use their disorders as an excuse to get away with things. Because 9 times out of 10, from what we see from history when it comes to allegations of sexual assault and abuse on celebrities and other famous individuals, majority of them, after digging and evidence is found, their claims are turned up to be false. Not all of them are false, but the majority of them are. And it worries me that when if this becomes a constant norm in today's society, people who are actual sufferers of sexual assault, actual sufferers of legit legal court of law definition of sexual assault and abuse, it worries me that they won't be taken seriously because of how common it has been to make false accusations just so that you can be famous for 15 minutes or jump a bandwagon. And I really hope it doesn't come to that, but seeing everything that has happened, even with the Vic situation and all the other stuff that has come to light just in these past few days, that of people going so far as to fake evidence so that way they can back up their quote-unquote claims, it worries me. Because I am a wholeheartedly firm believer of you should have a voice to speak out if you're a victim. It doesn't have to be a victim of sexual assault or abuse. It could be a victim of physical abuse. It could be a victim of emotional abuse. It could be a victim of witch hunting, which I have been a victim of. Now, granted, I was a little shit back then when it happened, so I guess the witch hunting in a way was well deserved. But every victim deserves a voice to speak out. However, there's a fine line between speaking out with the truth of what happened and using it as a platform to gain popularity and stir up more of a mob mentality. There's a fine line. And while yes, it can be irritating for people to demand evidence from these victims coming out, at the same time, because it's such a common occurrence nowadays, you can't fault the people for asking for evidence, because there have been many times where it's just not been true. And there will be skepticism because of that. So I myself am not saying the victims are lying. I'm just saying that based on patterns in the history, there have been times where there were accusations that proved to be false. I'm not saying that the claims against Vic Mignogna are false. I'm not saying that any other sexual assault claims against celebrities are false. I'm not saying any of that. I am saying that because of the pattern of false accusations, it's leading more and more people to be skeptical, and therefore more and more people wanting to demand evidence because of those who have had a history of falsifying claims. So again, I truly do worry about these individuals who are true victims of sexual abuse down the line in the future not being taken seriously because of those who make false claims just for the purpose of jumping a bandwagon or joining the mob to drag someone through the mud. Because of similar instances where someone would use their disability to make an excuse to get away with something, and later on people with those disabilities were never taken seriously again because of those who would, for lack of a better term, cry wolf. And I really hope it doesn't come to that, because sexual assault is such a serious issue, and it should not be taken lightly. But, as the saying goes, there is a bad apple in every bushel. And it just takes one bad apple to spoil the bushel. Psychologically, negativity is more potent, more pronounced than positivity, unfortunately. And when that one bad apple, its rotten, pungent smell becomes so prominent, it makes the entire bushel of good apples look bad. It was that way with those with disabilities because a bad apple just happened to use their disability as an excuse. And I worry, heavily worry, that it's going to be the same with these sexual assault victims. With those who make these false claims to make the entire group of sexual assault victims look bad and make them look like they're doing this for attention when that's not the case. Because there are people that do that for attention and solely for attention, but there are others who just want to speak out and have their voice and tell their story. There is a fine line between that. You can have a voice. You can speak out. But it all depends on how you use your words and your motives behind your speech. It's a fine, fine gray line. And I hope and I pray that those people who have suffered sexual assault and sexual abuse, I hope and pray that they do not become cast aside or looked at with a scrutinizing skeptic eye just because of these people in the social norm we live in nowadays to jump these bandwagons, jump these hypes just for attention. Because there are people out there who have actually suffered sexual assault and sexual abuse. And there are people who fake it just to jump the bandwagon. I don't know what else to say other than that, because this has gotten out of hand. And like I said in the beginning, this isn't an uncommon thing. This happens all the time with celebrities and famous people. You see it everywhere. This isn't an uncommon thing. It's just becoming more pronounced with these movements. And I don't want to get too political because I personally don't like politics in general. Like I said, I think both parties are horrible in their own way. But I just don't want something as serious as sexual assault and sexual abuse to become the next scrutinized skeptic demand for evidence, and just cast aside the whole using your disability as an excuse thing. Because there are people with disabilities, and there are people who use it as an excuse. There are people who have suffered abuse, and there are people who use it as an excuse, and so on and so forth. There's a bad apple in every bushel, and that bad apple will ultimately make the entire community of good apples look bad. So, this entire unscripted event is what I'm trying to figure out how to wrap this up, because I don't want to sound like a broken record and just go on for 5 more minutes saying the exact same thing. But if I could sum it up in any way, I just want to emphasize that this video is not at all about the Vic Mignogna controversy. It is during the hype of it all, yes, but like I said, and I will say again, accusations against famous individuals or people seen as famous is not an uncommon thing. We see it all the time. It's just, from what I can see, and something needs to be said before it gets to the point where they're doing more harm than good by, again, for the umpteenth time in a row, making these true victims of sexual assault look bad. And again, I just hope and pray that it does not come to that. Because true victims, they deserve to have a voice. But they don't deserve to be scrutinized and looked at with a skeptical eye because of people who make false and fake claims of being a victim of sexual abuse. Anyway, I don't know what else to say anymore. I apologize for this 20-minute ramble. This was completely unscripted, and I tried to keep my thoughts together as focused as I could because I wanted to talk about why this was bugging me, and I want to keep the whole issue of people using these things as an excuse. I don't want to talk about the Vic situation because, again, I am neutral on it. I personally don't want to get involved in it, but the concern and worry for these sexual assault victims is what I'm worried about, and I don't want it to get to that point. I really don't. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much to those who tuned in and listened. For those of you who might be new to the channel or anything, thank you for sticking to the end through all my ramblings and unscripted blabberings. I just hate seeing how out of control this has gotten. And my heart goes out to the victims of sexual assault and sexual abuse. Again, I will go on the record as saying, and say this as many times as I have to, you deserve to have a voice. Regardless of what you are a victim of, you are allowed to have a voice. Don't ever let anyone push you aside and say, oh, you're causing drama, oh, you're doing this and that. No. There are people that do that for drama purposes, there are people that do that for attention, there are people that fake stuff for all that stuff. And because of those fakers, it's what leads the true people who actually suffered that, it gives them a bad name. And I really don't want that to happen to the sexual assault victims, because that's just such a serious issue. But yeah, other than that, I don't want to see any Vic-related stuff in the comment section. If there are related to the topic, any kick Vic, I stand with Vic. Although I don't like to, I will delete the comment because I don't want that on this video. That's not what this topic is about. It's just the height of what's going on that may cause me to make this video. This video is about my concern for the true victims and hope for the future that they will not be subject to a scrutinizing, skeptical eye. It's already gotten to the point where people are demanding evidence from them, which is much, yes, but it's understandable because of the fakers, and I don't want it to get further out of hand. Anyway, I've gone on 2 extra minutes, so thank you again for those who stuck with me and tuned in. This is Saki signing out.